on this computer here. Yeah, Sam Christensen just showed up. Change the topic here.
We're talking about him.
All right. Well, what we'll do this time is we are recording the Zoom session number 3, and we are starting on the inner ear, portions about the inner ear. And we'll spend 2 weeks at least on this particular topic of hearing disorders. Boy, it is a short semester, though we're already 1/4 of the way through, you know what? So I had to make sure about that too. I had to really cut things out that I would like to have included, like tinnitus. I would love to have, but I think you're going to get tinnitus more in your counseling course. You have room for it there, and there's so much about tinnitus that requires counseling, so we figured, well, let's just put it there, and then that way we can just keep disorders, you know, focused on the actual organic kind of disorders here. What I'll do is I'll share screen here, and we'll talk about, we'll go to our notes first and pull up, and you'll see where we want to get through. We're looking at audiometry, hearing, inner ear disorders. I don't know why I've got audiometry written on the top of the page there, but because there is a little bit of audiometry, I always show audiometric results that you should see with the various disorders, and I think that's why I include that word. Just like we did with otitis media when we said you should know it's usually a flat kind of a loss with a bit of a pickup in air conduction at 2,000 hertz, and otosclerosis, it's a bit of a dip at 2,000 hertz in bone conduction, Carhart's notch, that type of stuff. It's good to be able to recognize a disorder by seeing the audiogram, and that's why we always fuse a little bit of audiometry into this course. But look where we like to get through today. If you see the notes here, inner ear disorders, I'll highlight this. I'm going to first talk about this, and then you'll see this portion on hereditary causes of sensory neural loss. I don't expect people to sit there memorizing this. In fact, I'm going to go over that real quickly, and I'll barely even make mention of this, okay? So that part is the least important. Then we will move on into non-hereditary prenatal causes. Now in English, I mean, it means non-genetic, before birth. Types of hearing loss: rubella, cytomegalovirus, there's a name for you. And then perinatal, during birth. Peri always means during. When you think of the word perimeter, that means around, okay? Perinatal means around birth. And usually the main cause of that is anoxia, difficulty during delivery, where the baby isn't getting enough oxygen. Now you should always realize the cochlea is a gas hog. It's an oxygen hog. It really uses up oxygen, and when you're losing oxygen, hearing is about the first sense to go. Okay, because there's a lot of oxygen that the cochlea uses. Then we'll look at hereditary causes of sensory neural loss, and that's usually shown like a cookie bite audiogram, often with a dip in the middle, kind of like a smile. Better hearing in the lows, worse in the mids, and then getting better in the highs. When you see that kind of sensory neural loss, not conductive, or you don't see that as a conductive loss, you'll see that as a sensory neural loss, where air conduction is the same as bone conduction. That's usually genetic, hereditary. Then you'll see something Mondini syndrome. We'll quickly go over that. I'll show you pictures of cochleas of Mondini syndrome. Not enough turns in the cochlea, fewer than 2.5 turns. And that's usually quite a severe hearing loss. That's often like a left corner audiogram. And it's a unique audio hearing loss too, because it fluctuates. In other words, if the client bangs his or her head, the Reissner's membrane tears, and the fluid, the perilymph and endolymph fluids mix, and the hearing gets worse. Then Reissner's membrane heals, and the fluids separate again, and the hearing gets a little bit better. But we'll talk about that later. And then we'll quickly go over these postnatal causes. We're just breaking it into prenatal, perinatal, postnatal. Postnatal causes is obvious. I mean, some otitis media can result in some kind of cochlear damage, being a mixed loss, but that's rare. Some otosclerosis can get involved into the cochlea, but that's rare. Meningitis can cause deafness. Okay? Measles can cause hearing loss. Mumps can cause unilateral sensory neural loss. Interesting, unilateral, mumps. Labyrinthitis, that's an infection or inflammation of the cochlea. Now, when you think about labyrinthitis, itis being an inflammation, you would rather have a viral infection than a bacterial. A bacterial infection, bacteria is germs. Germs are cells. Cells are huge. A bacterial infection of the cochlea eradicates your cochlea. You're deaf. A viral infection is kind of like what causes a flu. Viruses are tiny, 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 tiny little things compared to germs. And viruses you can't fight with antibiotics. Only germs you can, only bacteria. But a viral infection of the cochlea can go away, and then you can have hearing come back again. We'll touch on ototoxicity, and then we'll get into presbycusis. I'd like to finish with presbycusis today. So let's now go all the way back to the top, just giving you an overview of what we'd like to get covered. Back to this first paragraph here. It's very important, and put a star by sensory and by neural. The word sensory neural is 2 words. You can use a hyphen or a dash, but you don't have to. Okay? Sensory neural. Sensory is damage to the outer hair cells. Neural is damage to the inner hair cells. And as you've learned in anatomy class, inner hair cells cannot pick up sounds below 50. They need the outer hair cells to help them mechanically pick up sounds below 50. The outer hair cells stretch and shrink. And that stretching and shrinking helps the inner hair cells sense soft sounds. So you can tell that the outer hair cells are the moving part. And since they're the moving part, they die first. Any mechanical moving part in a system goes first. So when you lose outer hair cells, you lose about 50% of your hearing. Okay, you can't hear sounds below 50. And that's a good way to break things down, just in general, painting the cochlea with broad strokes. So if you see someone with a mild to moderate sensory neural loss, chances are he or she has outer hair cell damage. And outers die before inners. If you see someone with an 80 decibel, a severe hearing loss, you know the person's got outer and inner ear pathology. And when you break things down into a mild to moderate loss, and I'll kind of share a screen here. If you get 2 people, okay, and both of them have a 50 dB hearing loss. Both of them have presbycusis, mild to moderate hearing loss. One of them's got excellent word recognition. The other one's got poor word recognition. Chances are the person with the better word recognition probably has damage confined only to outer hair cells. In other words, the damage to the outer hair cells gave rise to that person's 50 decibel hearing loss. The person with crummy word recognition, if you were able to open up his or her cochlea, you would see that probably that person's mild to moderate loss resulted from a mixture of both outer and inner hair cell pathology. And outers receive info from the brain. As we know, they help the inners pick up soft sounds, but inners send all info to the brain. So if you've got inner hair cell pathology, you're getting a garbled message sent to the brain, and you're going to have poor word recognition. And that's one of the earmarks, so to speak, of poor speech discrimination, is probably, it means that the person has inner hair cell pathology. So it's a way to break things down into a poof, poof. And you'll see that in the latest edition of my book, too. And I always highlight this. Oh, okay. In this weird-looking book that I got here, you may have seen this thing floating around, okay? In that book, I really break down the words sensory and neural. In fact, Chapter 2 deals with sensory loss. Chapter 3 is neural. And it's really, too few people do that, and I think we as clinicians should. And it helps us to break down our hearing disorders, especially of the inner ear. So sharing screen here again. So that covers here. That's that paragraph. That's exactly what we covered. Okay? You've got two general populations of sensory neural loss. One has mild to moderate. One has severe. And their needs in hearing aids are different. The severe hearing loss person is going to need directional microphones, or as remote mics, is going to need FM systems, is going to need peripheral devices, help with the TV, all kinds of closed captioning. This person's going to require the stuff that's bundled with hearing aids in sales of hearing aids, whereas the mild to moderate loss person can still talk pretty well on the phone, has no problem taking out the hearing aid even and hearing on the phone. They're different populations, and that's what I really think people need to internalize and understand. What if we work our way down here now? So again, neural refers to inner hair cells and eighth nerve. Damage results in severe loss, poor word recognition, normal tympanograms, and looky, absent acoustic reflexes. Absent acoustic reflexes. And when you think about that, what is the acoustic reflex? Okay, it's the tightening of the little muscles of the middle ear. And the acoustic reflex arc, what does it involve? The outer ear canal, the middle ear, the cochlea. Hold on, what part of the cochlea? The inner hair cells, not the outers, the inners, because they send info to the eighth nerve. The outers don't. Okay, the outers just help the inners pick up soft sounds. So, outer ear canal, middle ear, inner hair cells, eighth nerve, brain stem, and then from the brain stem, a tiny little nerve called the OCB, olivo-cochlear bundle. Olivo with a pimento, green, little red dot in the middle. I'm just kidding. Good grief. Anyway, olivo-cochlear bundle, okay? Tiny little nerve running along the eighth nerve, but in the opposite direction. And where does that go? Outer hair cells. So you have a loop, okay? The acoustic reflex arc, though, goes outer ear canal, middle ear, inner hair cells, eighth nerve, and it's not the outer hair cells. Leave that one alone. Seventh cranial nerve to the stapedius muscle, fifth cranial nerve to the tensor tympani muscle. That's the acoustic reflex arc. Okay? The neural arc of hair cells is info going, through the inner hair cells to the eighth nerve, and then you have the outer hair cells fed information by the olivo-cochlear bundle. And that's the stretching and shrinking of the outer hair cells helps the inner hair cells pick up soft sounds. But that's not the acoustic reflex arc. So, in mild to moderate sensory neural loss, what's damaged? The outer hair cells. What about the inners? They're fine. So the person should get an acoustic reflex. Loud sounds put in the ear should still cause an acoustic reflex, even with mild to moderate sensory neural loss. But if you've got severe sensory neural loss, now you've got damage to the inners as well. So guess what? You've got a broken link in your acoustic reflex arc because the inner hair cells are gone now. So you won't have an acoustic reflex. So severe loss has absent acoustic reflexes. Mild to moderate loss has present acoustic reflexes. Get it? See, this is what they are learning in audiology at Missouri State University in their AUD program. This is what they study. And this is exactly, I told you I'm going to cheat. I'm tearing pages out of audiology and I'm throwing them at you so that we make sure that as HISs from OTC, we've got an edge over the IHS grad who doesn't know this stuff. They wouldn't have a clue. It's just not part of their shtick. Okay, back to where our set of lies was. Okay, here we go. So that's the stuff that I really want you to kind of grip, is read that first paragraph very, very carefully. Put a large star by that. Then we can move on and bypass this whole thing about hereditary causes of hearing loss. Read that for your own information, FYI. Or you could put FNO, for nerds only. Or you could call it FNO, freak not out. Okay, either way, it's all good. Okay, now let's move on down to non-hereditary prenatal causes of sensory neural loss. What's a big one? Rubella. If mom is pregnant and she's got German measles, mom won't feel too bad. The German measles will go away in a couple of days, but the baby may be born with severe hearing loss. So rubella, German measles in mother who's carrying baby may result in the baby having severe hearing loss. Cytomegalovirus is a herpes virus that is often mild on the person who has it. However, the developing fetus has a 30% chance of sensory neural loss. I just say these things, they're not common, but they're there, and I want you to have heard of them. Perinatal, during birth. Causes of loss during birth, well, as we said earlier, okay, lack of oxygen, and the cochlea is a gas hog. If you're losing oxygen to the baby during a traumatic birth process, the baby may suffer hearing loss as a result. And the losses will not be conductive, of course, because anoxia, lack of oxygen, will kill off hair cells, leading to sensory neural loss. Hereditary hearing loss is usually sensory neural, can be any configuration or shape, but cookie bite is an audiogram. That's that U-shaped audiogram that I talked about earlier. Cookie bite loss. Mondini syndrome. The cochlea doesn't have all 2.5 turns. It's got only maybe 1.5 turns. Okay? Aside from Meniere's, it's the only sensory neural loss that can fluctuate. There's 2 sensory neural losses that fluctuate. One's Meniere's, and the other one is Mondini. And we'll look at Mondini now. Let's look at some pictures. Enough of the notes. Let's check out pictures. Okay, move it on up. Up, up, up. Okay. All right. So you're looking at this picture of the cochlea here. I'll bring this in closer. And you can see here, you're looking at the scala media. Mondini means that this Reissner's membrane is easily torn. In a cochlea that has too few turns, the membranes are not always all there either. And if the person bangs his head or is exposed to loud sounds, this membrane can rupture. So that endolymph fluid now communicates with paralymph fluid. And when that happens, the hearing loss gets worse. When this heals, as it almost always does, then the endolymph remains separated again from the paralymph, and the hearing gets a little bit better. The loss is usually fairly severe, though. It usually is. Okay, remember this kind of view about the cochlea too. Unrolled, always keep this in your minds from anatomy class, because this is going to help explain Meniere's disease next week when we look at Meniere's in our second week of inner ear disorders. Look at how the wide end of the cochlea versus the narrow end of the cochlea. Look at how the basilar membrane, the floor upon which the hair cells stand, notice how it gets wider toward the apex, narrower toward the base. This is a good picture to explain why high frequencies affect hair cells at the base and why low frequencies stimulate hair cells at the apex. And the reason, of course, is that this area has less mass, and it's also more stiff, and that resonates with highs. This area has more mass, and it's less stiff. It therefore resonates with lows. So a low frequency sound will cause a traveling wave here, and a high frequency sound will cause a traveling wave here. I kind of like this picture showing the oval window, the round window. It's a good one, I think. Anyway, Just a review out of anatomy, though. How come horizontal back and forth movement in the cochlea, how does that cause an up and down motion taking place at the hair cells? And the reason why, it's all about that helicotrema, the narrowing at the tip. So when you're pushing fluid, it's getting squeezed around a corner. And there's a buildup of pressure as a result. And that buildup of pressure will result in the basilar membrane being bent here, or being bent here, or being bent here. And that bending is the traveling wave. Okay? So think of the cochlea as always having two actions. There's a horizontal back and forth motion, oval window and round window. The oval pushes in, the round bulges, excuse me, and then you have that up and down action happening as a result. And you may wonder how that happens. Well, it's all about that helicotrema. Helicotrema, la, 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 la. All right, and this is just a verbal description of that, what I was just talking about. So here's the pushing in of the oval window. The fluid gets squeezed around, and therefore you've got a buildup of pressure. So the indent may take place anywhere along the basilar membrane, and that indentation is the cochlear traveling wave. Okay, much of pictures of hundreds of traveling waves occurring with the utterance of one word, information. Okay. Look at all the traveling waves occurring. And of course, you've got the sharpening taking place on each of those traveling waves. Notice how they're more toward the apex when you've got a vowel sound. They're more toward the base when you have a high frequency sound like F. So information. Anyway, stuff from anatomy. Outer cells, inner cells, hair cells, hair cells, hair cells. Moving on in, you've seen these before, okay? Size of a hair, human hair, size of a hair cell. Size of a hair cell. Look at the bug, see the gear, bring it closer, see the white dot on one of the teeth of the gear, and basically bringing it in closer highlights how small those hair cells are. Just playing around with you here. This is kind of like, we can call this our coffee break here. Oh, did I show you my coffee cup? I might have shown this to you. I don't know. Hippy dippy. There you go. Just thought I'd show that to you. All right, Venomous, smoke another one. Okay, here we go. So, now you're moving through the hair cells here. Damaged hair cells. See now, what degree of hearing loss would this person have when you're looking at that cochlea? Probably a mild to moderate sensory neural loss. The damage is mostly due to the outer hair cells. It's not really much damage to the inners. So this is that breakdown of that of the two groups mainly of sensory neural loss. Perfect hearing looks like this, of course. Impaired looks like this. Whether you're talking English or Chinese, doesn't matter. Okay, again, here's now a traveling wave without outer hair cells and a traveling wave with outer hair cells. And because of that sharpening, it is all about that sharpening. When that's gone, you have a more dull and rounded traveling wave. So now you can't distinguish between frequencies close together, whereas with outer hair cells, you've got not only the amplification taking place so that you can hear sounds below 50 dB, but you also have better frequency resolution. You can separate frequencies close together. Always remember this. This is the most common hearing loss in the world, is damage to outer hair cells. Okay? And that's why it's all about, I focus on anatomy, even in hearing disorders, because what's the main hearing disorder? Outer hair cell damage. What's the main result? Can't hear in noise. Doesn't like the hearing aids. They pick up too much noise. I can't separate speech from background noise. Well, no wonder you can't separate speech from background noise. Look at the inside of your cochlea. Look what you've got. You have a dull, rounded, traveling waves. So you're combing your hair with a comb that's got 4 or 5 teeth. You're not combing your hair with a comb that's got 100 teeth. You have lost your ability to distinguish between frequencies close together. Your frequency resolution has gone down. That's why hearing aids and people mix like oil and water. And that's why I spend time making sure we're grounded in this. Because what defines us as a field, the HIS field, it's this. That's what defines us. This is what makes us different from optometry. Optometry is conductive vision loss. Okay? We aren't. We're like the damage to the retina of the eye itself. So again, looking at the outer hair cells as they are normally embedded into the underside of the tectorial membrane, when you're looking at the movements thereof, and I know the slide's going to jump, it always does. Okay, there we go. So I'll go back. Now it'll behave. Okay, but just look at the action of the outer hair cells pulling the membrane down so that it can bend the hairs of the inner hair cells. That's how the traveling wave gets sharpened. Okay? And this action of the outer hair cells tightens the basilar membrane and pushes it up, but it also enables the inner hair cells to pick up sounds below 50 dB. So this action results in this. Okay? When you haven't got that action, you have passive traveling waves and you don't have active traveling waves. So it's I highlight this on purpose. I really want people to know. Okay, so now let's move on in our notes then. Where are we? Mondini syndrome. Too few turns in the cochlea. I wonder if I've got the picture of that. I think I do. Let's go. Yeah, here's Mondini. So here's a normal cochlea. Okay, in your PowerPoint, you'll see 2.5 turns there. And notice how the basilar membrane gets wider and wider as you go up the cochlea. So I didn't make this up. This is a real human cochlea. This is Mondini. Too few turns. And notice Reisner's membrane is very thin, easily torn. So just to give you an idea, incomplete development with malformation of the cochlea. So, ototoxicity. Now this is a small section here in the notes that you should put a star by as well. Remember the drugs that are ototoxic. They end in the suffix mycin, M-Y-C-I-N. So there's lots of examples. Streptomycin, kanamycin, vancomycin, neomycin. These are antibiotics, and they belong to a family of drugs called aminoglycosides. It's in your notes right there, aminoglycosides. So why don't we just take a look at our notes then and see, okay? So I'll take a peek, see where we've got this written here. Ototoxicity. Aminoglycosides. There's where it's all written down. Okay? They cause permanent hair cell damage in either the vestibular system or the cochlea or both. Okay? They're given to people who they were often given to people who had tuberculosis. I'm going to just kind of share with you this. There's a city close to Toronto, Ontario, Canada. It's at the end of Lake Ontario. If you look at the Great Lakes, there's 5 of them. One of them is called Lake Ontario. And at the corner end of Lake Ontario, there's a city called Hamilton. And if you zoom in on Hamilton, they had a sanatorium there. And it was after World War II. It was for people who had tuberculosis, lung disease. And these people were given streptomycin on big doses, and it helped get rid of the tuberculosis. It was really good. It worked like really well. But half of those people walked out deaf as posts, couldn't hear anymore. Okay, they lived. It stopped the tuberculosis, but it killed off their hearing. Now, some of those drugs don't kill off hearing as much. They ruin your balance. But either way, the aminoglycosides are a family of antibiotics. They end in the suffix mycin. There's one exception, and you should write this down if it's not in the notes, and I bet maybe it is in the notes. I'll see if I've updated them from last year or not. We'll check this out. Yes, I'll put it in there. Erythromycin. You're going to see this one here quite commonly, where it's grayed out there. Erythromycin is commonly given by doctors. Okay, that one is not an aminoglycoside. Okay, even though it ends in mycin, you will see this drug. And the way we often learn, when you hear about something once, you hear about it all of a sudden again later on. So mark my words, you'll probably see this word again in the next week, probably on a bottle of medicine in someone's medicine cabinet. Who knows? Quinine was given for malaria in India. Okay, and it causes tinnitus and it causes sensory neural loss, big time. Aspirin. Now here's an interesting one. Poor Ted Venema, he can't take aspirin. I'm allergic to it. When I was going to the University of Oklahoma in my late 30s, I developed asthma, and I also developed an allergy to aspirin. What a drag, because Tylenol isn't as good. Aspirin's better, you know. Aspirin's better for a headache. It's better for a lot of things, but I can't take it. If I do, I get all hives. Well, anyway, so it's Tylenol for Teddy, but this isn't about me. Aspirin, elderly people take aspirin as a blood thinner. They take aspirin for arthritis, okay? Doctors put them on it for good reason. But aspirin also aggravates tinnitus. So when an elderly person in your office comes to you and says, yeah, I've got a real ringing in my ears, one of the first questions you should ask is, are you taking, what are you taking? What meds are you taking? And if the person mentions aspirin, don't say don't take aspirin, but say, you know what, that might be one of the reasons why you've got the ringing in the ears too. Aspirin tends to aggravate ringing in the ears. When you stop taking aspirin, the ringing in the ears goes away. So it's not permanent. Unlike the aminoglycosides, the damage isn't permanent. Now, aspirin doesn't cause hearing loss, okay? Just aggravates ringing in the ears. Anyway, so the ringing in the, it's just good to know why. And once you know why, things get way more settled. Think about, and this is something about tinnitus. I'll mention to you something about tinnitus, just here. Tinnitus is a sound that only the person who has it hears. It's not an objective sound. You can't put a mic there and measure the sound. It's not, repeat, not that, okay? Sounds do come out of the ears, though. They're called otoacoustic emissions. And those are byproducts of the outer hair cells working their asses off. Okay, but that's not tinnitus. Don't mix that up. Audiologists test for otoacoustic emissions. If you've got them, it means that you've got outer hair cells. They use them for infant hearing screening. Does the baby have OAEs? If so, good. Okay, if not, better send to an audiologist. Anyway, tinnitus is a subjective sound. Only the person who's got it hears it. And it's not a real sound. It's caused by an imbalance of afferent, inner hair cell going, and efferent, outer hair cell coming information. And it's kind of more, the brain is creating it, not so much the ear, but the brain is creating it due to hair cell damage. Now, think about being in traffic, and you're stuck on the highway, and you are in gridlock. You aren't moving. You're just sitting there. For 20 minutes, you've been sitting there. How's your heart rate doing? Probably you're aggravated. You're, God, what's going on? Finally, you step out of your car. You knock on the door of a trucker, of a great big transport truck, because that person's higher up. And you go, do you know what's going on here? And the guy said, yeah, there's an accident up ahead. It's about a mile ahead. I can see there's a, oh, okay. All right, back in your car, get on the cell phone, phone your spouse. Yeah, I'm going to be late. I'm stuck in traffic. But now watch your heartbeat. All of a sudden you're feeling better. It's kind of like now you know the reason. Okay, now you know, oh, okay. That's the treatment for tinnitus, by the way. That's one of the main treatments of tinnitus is getting the person to realize it's not dangerous. It's not a tumor. It's not going to kill you. What you're worried about, it's your primitive brain is freaking. And you're lining a layer of sand or a grain of sand, and you're making a pearl out of it. And it's your reaction to it. That's the worst thing about tinnitus. It's not the actual loudness of tinnitus. Tinnitus is actually really quiet. Do you know how soft tinnitus is? It's usually 5 decibels above your hearing level, which means 5 dB sensation level. But it's what you're making out of it. Think of a tap dripping in the bathroom across the hall and you're trying to sleep. How bad are you going to let it bug you? It may not even be loud. It's just, how much are you going to let it bug you? You can't sleep and it's 2 o'clock in the morning. You got to get up at 6. Guess what? You're not going to go to sleep because you're thinking about it too much. Now it's 3 o'clock. Now it's 4. Okay? If tinnitus is the treatment for tinnitus is twofold. Provide a little bit of background noise. Because when you provide a little bit of background noise, it takes the edge off of tinnitus. The other prong of treatment is counseling. Okay, it's real. So I hope you guys get tinnitus covered in your, I believe it's your counseling course. I think it's 260. You'll get a whole section on tinnitus. And you can blame me for that section because I made that up and gave it to the instructor. It's in there. But tinnitus it's an inner ear disorder. So I make mention of it in disorders here. Okay, just because I'd like to have a whole week to spend on it here in 125, but we can't. So this has been my cursory little mention about tinnitus. Okay, where were we? Coffee break's over, back in our heads. All right, let's look at our notes here. So now let's move to presbycusis. Presbycusis, oh, by the way, ototoxicity is often first noticed for high frequencies. So that's why I had in your notes, I had a picture, I think, something like that. Here, ototoxicity, there's a picture of it. Okay, often high frequencies. Now look at sensory neural loss and make this your friend, this picture. Air conduction right ear, the O's, air conduction left ear, the X's, and these hatch signs are bone conduction, aren't they? You've learned that in audiometry. When bone conduction follows air conduction, you have sensory neural loss. In other words, headphone testing, hearing loss. Headphone testing, hearing loss. Avoid the ear, oscillator on the mastoid, still have hearing loss. That's sensory neural. Bone conduction, no better than air conduction, is of course sensory neural loss. And this is the most common sensory neural loss you're going to find. This is what presbycusis looks like too. Okay, but ototoxicity usually kills off high frequencies first. Very common. So here's normal hair cells, damaged hair cells. Notice it's the outers, not the inners so much. Okay, typical presbycusis. There's an audiogram. Now let's break down the word presbycusis. Got to look at that word. Look at that word real carefully. What church does that remind you of? Presbyterian.
Presbyterian.
Okay. Presbyterian means church of the elders, as opposed to the deacons. That's serious. Church of the elders. Presbycusis, hearing of the elders. Presbyopia, look at my glasses. I'm more than 40, so I can't see close up. My arms aren't long enough to read the page. And when people hit 40, you start having to wear reading glasses. And I show this every year. Guess where I got these reading glasses? I got these reading glasses from an audiologist in Springfield, Missouri. Her name is Sue Exton, and her husband teaches at Missouri State University. She gave these to me years ago. Like, these are over 10 or 15 years. I still use these things. They work like crazy. I don't know. They're good ones. Anyway, they're not prescription. They're just probably a buck. Anyway, presbyopia, vision in the elders. Their arms aren't long enough. So presbyopia hits you when you're 40. Presbycusis hits you when you're 65. And what is presbycusis? Hearing loss in the treble. The trouble hearing treble. Trouble with treble. And notice this person here. Air conduction, both ears, shows a sloping sensory neural loss. Bone conduction, same thing. No better. Okay? If this was conductive hearing loss, it would be flat. and bone conduction would be up here. So mostly due to outer hair cell loss, sensory as opposed to neural, fair to good speech discrimination. So when the person say the word this, say the word that, pretty good, probably about 80%, 85%, not bad, you know, pretty good, can't complain. Okay, presbycusis, very, very common. As we age, okay, hearing loss, as we age, look at the advent of presbycusis. Now I'm going to tell you a little story about England. There's a guy several years ago who invented a device called the mosquito. And the mosquito is a little speaker, about the size of this baseball here, and it hangs from the edge of the doorway of his drugstore. And it emits a 15,000 hertz tone. 15,000. Now, what are the frequencies of an audiogram? 125 to 8. Okay, this one emits 15,000 hertz, so it's way beyond the audiogram. The teenagers can't stand it. They almost feel it. They hear a high-pitched and it almost grates the back of their teeth. Oh, God, let's get out of here. The adults can't hear it. So it keeps the kids from hanging around the drugstore. Okay? We get presbycusis from the day we are born. As an infant, you can hear from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. By the time you're 10, you can't hear 20,000 hertz anymore. By the time you're 20, you can't hear 18,000 hertz anymore. By the time you're 30, you can't hear 15. By the time you're 40, you can't hear. By the time you're 65, now it's invading the audiometric test frequencies. So we need to think about presbycusis as an ongoing thing that now by the time you're 65, now it's hit the audiogram range, resulting in high frequency sensory neural loss. Okay, so the story of presbycusis in a big way, that would be it. Now if I can kind of alternate here, and let's see if I can show you in the notes. Let's read our notes on presbycusis. It's by far the most common hearing loss. It begins at age 65. 30% of people 65 plus have it. So put a star by that. Excuse me, 50% of people 75 plus have it. So it's common, 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 common. And you can tell when people start freaking about hearing aids in these shops, you know. Oh, I don't want that guy to open up his shop near me. It's going to take away all my business. Are you nuts? How many people should be wearing hearing aids that are 75 plus? About one in two. Look at the market. How many people are actually wearing hearing aids who should wear hearing aids? 20%? Okay, so the market is barely penetrated when it comes to hearing loss and hearing aids. There is room to grow, folks, and please don't freak about over-the-counter hearing aids either. Embrace them. A shop selling hearing aids should also sell over-the-counter hearing aids, just like an optical shop should sell reading glasses. Think of over-the-counter hearing aids like reading glasses. They're an entryway into the field. Eventually, I'll feel like going to an optometrist and I'll get real glasses. I just don't feel like it yet. These still work okay for me, but you know. Anyway, these are just things that I would think about. Presbycusis is so common. It's the most common hearing loss in the world. Obviously has to affect more than just the cochlea, though. The whole central auditory nervous system ages. Eighth nerve, brainstem, auditory areas of the brain. The whole body's older. The middle ear ossicles are older. The oval window and round windows are older. Jurger, the guy who came up with your types of tympanograms, Jurger type A, Jurger type B, Jurger type C, he's still living. And he lives down in Renee's area, down in Texas. That's where he's from. Okay. Jurger says very elderly people shouldn't be fit with 2 hearing aids. when a person's 85 years old fit monoraly because they've got central presbycusis, central being in quotes, central presbycusis. So they can't handle binaural input. First of all, 2 hearing aids gets too complicated for them. They lose, it just gets too much. But also, a monaural hearing aid fitting may often be most appropriate for someone who's 85 plus. Think about that. There's research on it, okay? It's not just Ted Venema talking. It's out there. If you Google up Jerger and central presbycusis, up will pop the articles, okay? Just want you to know. Don't worry about phonemic regression. It's an old term. It just means poorer speech recognition. The audiogram is usually mild to moderate, sloping more to loss in the high frequencies. You can just write in your notes, trouble hearing treble. The trouble with treble. And what type of tympanograms would you see with presbycusis? Normal type A, nothing wrong with the middle ear. Normal or acoustic reflexes present, nothing wrong with the middle ear. Let's move on down here. Here you better put a star here too now, okay? 4 classic types of presbycusis. Sensory, neural, well, that ties us right to the beginning of our talk today, doesn't it? Sensory presbycusis, neural presbycusis. Sensory presbycusis is mostly outer hair cell damage, especially around the high frequencies, around the basal turn of the cochlea. The audiogram shows high frequency sensory neural loss and decent word recognition. Write that in there as well. Decent word recognition. Pretty good. Not bad. Can't complain. Okay? Pretty good. Not bad. I can't complain. All right. Neural presbycusis. Okay, that's usually the 8th nerve and inner hair cells are affected. Speech discrimination is poor. Oftentimes the audiogram is fairly flat, a little bit worse in the highs. Poor word recognition. Usually neural presbycusis is worse in degree than sensory because outers die before inner hair cells. When the outers die, you've got a 50 dB loss. Then the inners begin to go. Now you got 60, 70, 80, okay? But sometimes, like I said at the beginning, you might have 2 people with mild to moderate loss. And one has excellent word recognition and the other one has poor recognition. It may very well be that if you were able to look inside the cochleas of both of these individuals, the person with the poor recognition has inner hair cell damage contributing to his loss, whereas the person with the excellent word recognition has only outer hair cell damage contributing to his or her loss. Strial presbycusis. That's called a feeding type of disorder. The stria vascularis, the blood supply to the cochlea. The blood supply to the cochlea is affected. And so when you've lost blood, when your blood supply to the cochlea is compromised, you're going to have hair cell damage all along the cochlea. And that's why strial presbycusis is fairly flat. Strial presbycusis is more common in women than in men, because women have more susceptibility to heart disease than men. Okay, so in elderly women, generally will be a bigger population with strial presbycusis in women than there will be in men. Cochlear conductive presbycusis means it's not so much the hair cells that are damaged, but there's less mobility in the cochlear partitions. The basilar membrane is stiffer. Reissner's membrane is stiffer. The whole organ of Corti has lost its flexibility. Now, the person who came up with these types, his name was Schucknecht. So I put a circle around Schucknecht because it's Schucknecht who classified these 4 types of presbycusis. What he did, he was a medical ear, nose, and throat physician. And what he did was he took all these audiograms from audiologists who did tests on elderly people, And then he examined the bodies after these people had died. So what he did was look at the cadavers of elderly people who had died, and he opened up the cochleas, and then he matched the damage to the audiogram. Let's say okay. And he found trends. When there was mostly outer hair cell damage, yeah, the guy's loss was usually mild to moderate, and the word recognition was pretty good. So he called that sensory presbycusis. Then he'd find an audiogram where the person had really sort of a flatter loss with a drop-off more in the highs and poor word recognition. And inside that person's cochlea, he found inner hair cell damage as well as outer. Okay. So he classified that as neural presbycusis. Then he found fairly flat hearing losses that had pretty good word recognition. So these were flat losses with excellent word recognition yet. And they were more often women. Strial presbycusis, because it wasn't so much the hair, it was like an even amount of hair cell damage all around the turns of the cochlea. Blood supply problems. And then he found kind of a garbage can category that didn't really fit into the above three. And he called that mechanical cochlear conductive hearing loss. In other words, the partitions of the cochlea were stiff and didn't really move as well what they did with a traveling wave as well as they should. So you've got Schucknecht's 4 classic types of presbycusis. And it's good to have a handle on who that guy was. Make sure you know how to spell his name. It's a good one for you. Lots of K's and CH's and a good German name for you. Schucknecht. Ja, was ist your name? Ja, Schucknecht. Herr Dr. Schucknecht. So, when we move down from there, we're almost done our hour here for this week. Yeah, we look at gender effects. Now you're looking at gender effects of presbycusis. And this was done by Jerger as well. And look what it says, Jerger et al. Whenever you see the word et al, that just means and everyone. It's Latin, okay? Jerger and others. And it's JAAA, that means Journal of the American Academy of Audiology. So he published this in 1993, so it's been a little while. Males often show steeper sensory neural loss with better hearing in the lows and worse in the highs, due to probably a combination of noise-induced hearing loss along with presbycusis. Noise-induced hearing loss, because more men, especially elderly men, when men were mostly working in the workforce, they had more noise exposure. So men, elderly men, often present with a fairly more of a sloping, precipitous kind of drop. Women, not always, we're making generalizations, but Jerger found that elderly women often show a flatter sensory neural loss, with worse low-frequency hearing than men, but better high-frequency hearing. It's a flatter loss. Due to more heart and stroke disease in women, stria vascularis is more affected. So it probably means a strial type of presbycusis. See? There you go. Stria vascularis is the blood supply to the cochlea. Let's look at the stria vascularis, just for the sheer heck of it. Here's your stria vascularis. Have a peek. Blood supply. Okay, it's the blood supply to the hair cells. This will be the spiral ligament, of course, basilar membrane. What do you call it? This is another. I can't remember the name. Spiral ligament, spiral lamina. That's what this is. Spiral lamina, spiral ligament, and the basilar membrane in between. Okay. All right, and here's of course spiral ganglia, a gang of spirals. All right, anyway, so where are we in our good old notes here then? We will, let's see, escape out of here, look at our notes, and we are all done presbycusis today. I wanted to get to this spot today, and I want to introduce you to a little bit of noise-induced loss, and then we'll start on this next week again. Noise-induced loss is the second most common cause of hearing loss in the world. Okay, so think about that. How much hearing loss is conductive? 5%. How much hearing loss is in the world is sensory neural? 95. Okay? And of that 95%, the bulk of it is presbycusis, but the second most common cause of sensory neural loss is noise-induced hearing loss. And you've got to put this riddle together too, because noise-induced loss is also the most preventable hearing loss. That's what's so weird. You can't do anything about aging. I always tell when I'm doing talks at Rotary centers and elderly homes and stuff like that, I always say when you're getting better with age, okay, it's like wine gets better with age. When you get better with age, you tend to have trouble hearing trouble. But noise-induced hearing loss is purely man-made. I mean, think about it. Our ears were meant to hear soft voices over the crackling of a fire, okay, with the occasional roar of a lion in the distance, a clap of thunder once in a while. But I mean, those are the sounds, the snapping of twigs, you know, soft, a flute playing or something. We're not, and speech. We were not meant to hear steel on steel. Okay, this is our industrial pollution. We have noise pollution. Our ears were never meant to hear that. So elderly in Africa have better hearing than elderly in the US. The reason why is because Africa has less noise pollution. They're less industrialized. So when you think about the jackhammers and the construction sites and traffic and transport trucks and hunting with rifles, you know, louds, all the stuff that we hear, you know, just like chainsaws, just their general noise pollution society. And then you're sitting behind some young person and he or she's got an iPad or iPod and you can hear the headphones and you're not even listening to the headphones. Okay, guess what? That kid's going to have permanent noise-induced hearing loss. And they will get presbycusis ahead of their time. Because noise-induced hearing loss looks exactly like this. Let's show you a picture of it. We'll pick up on this next week, but I'm just kind of dipping our toes into it right here. So the classic noise-induced hearing loss. Okay, let's see. There you go. Noise-induced hearing loss. It looks like there's a dip in the highs. Where is it? Here, noise-induced loss. Check it out, okay? You can see the X's and O's, really good, normal hearing all the way out to 2,000 hertz, and then all of a sudden there's a precipitous drop at 4K. And that drop at 4,000 hertz is due, actually, to the middle, or I should say the outer ear canal. Oops, I'm showing you more slides, due to this. So when you see in this here, okay, that's what it's...
Doctor.
Pardon?
Share screen, please. I can only see these two guys and you.
Okay, hang on here. Yeah, something's
I want to see.
I want to see. Okay, where are we here? There you go. Okay, I didn't share a screen. No wonder. No kidding. I thought it was kind of weird because I couldn't see you guys on the side. Usually I can see you on the side. Thank you. Let's share a screen. Wouldn't that be nice, Ted? Share. Be nice. Yeah. Okay, here we go. This would be noise-induced loss. I'm going to go up to here. There's your classic noise-induced hearing loss. Just classic. Okay, normal hearing all the way up to 2,000 hertz, and then a sudden drop in the high frequencies. When you're testing hearing and you see this kind of a shape, automatically your mind should be going ding, 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 noise-induced loss. That's what it looks like. Normal out to 2,000. They're the hardest people to fit with hearing aids, too. Can you imagine? Just amplifying here. So the results when you're fitting with a hearing aid are very subtle because the voices aren't louder. Because where's your voice? In the low frequencies. And you're not providing any gain in the low frequencies. So the results of amplification are very subtle. The only sounds that should be louder are just the high frequency consonants. He can hear quite well without a hearing aid. In other words, in one-on-one, wouldn't even notice this. You wouldn't even think he has a hearing loss. One-on-one, wouldn't even dream of it. His uncomfortable loudness levels is going to be just like yours and mine. Totally. His word recognition in quiet, probably about 90%. Okay, really good. So, but he just has trouble hearing the high frequencies. So in noise, he's lost. A chain is as strong as its weakest link. In noise, he's screwed. Can't then in a noisy bar, he's lost. But one-on-one, you would never even notice. And the reason why of the loss like this in the highs is because of this. It's the outer ear canal resonance. And noise tends to damage hair cells a half an octave higher than the noise. So if you think of noise as a broad band, okay, if lows, mids, and highs, and it gets put through this resonance of your outer ear, you're lifting these frequencies by about 20 dB. So you're adding to the intensity of the high frequencies because of the resonance of your outer ear. And noise tends to kill off hair cells a half an octave higher than the frequency of the noise. So if you take this and you shift it to the right a half an octave and you flip it upside down, you got that. Okay? So we'll continue on this next week. Noise-induced hearing loss, and then we'll move into Meniere's disease, and that will basically take us to the end of inner ear disorders. So I'd say we've covered a good bit today. Not bad, can't complain. I'll stop sharing here. All right. Yeah, sorry about that little mix-up. I'm glad you said something because I would have kept on going. But I did notice something was weird. I wondered if we got cut off because I couldn't see anybody on the sides. Anyway, it's been a slice. Thanks for showing up as usual. And live long and prosper.
I have a question though, real quick.
No way.
No,
Yeah.
no time for that.
I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
It's about an upcoming assignment that I have. I'm not sure if it's your class or 170, but on the audiogram, it shows normal to mild hearing loss to about 4,000. And then I can't remember which one, but one goes up and one goes down. Whoa.
Weird. Yeah, weird.
Hint?
Yeah, now I have no idea. That's just kind of one of those, I couldn't tell you. Hey?
You're the smartest guy we know.
I don't know where that's from. Like I didn't come up with that audiogram, but you may very well, you can see some weird stuff. So you're saying the guy's got normal hearing down to about 2,000 and then one goes up at 4 and the other one goes down at 4?
Uh-huh.
Are you sure the person did the hearing test right?
Well, like I said, it's an example for our assignment coming up.
Let's see. Okay, Renee's showing me.
Yes.
Weird.
Isn't that weird?
I wouldn't know quite what to, oh, it looks like noise-induced loss in one ear and presbycusis in the other ear. And yeah, Renee, what's that? At 4,000 hertz. Okay, the biggest dip, is that at 4,000? Is that where we're looking at the biggest dip in the left ear?
Like it, is that 4,000?
Yeah, that's at 4. That looks like it's at 4, yeah.
Okay.
And 6,000 hertz, they didn't do bone conduction, did they? I don't see bone conduction at 6. They only did bone up till 4. Some newer audiometers have, thanks Renee, that helps. If some bone conduction, they can go up to 6,000. So you might want to ask why they didn't do bone conduction at 6 and just put in parentheses because some audiometers can test bone at 6.
Okay.
But usually, often people stop at 4. I don't know why that would be. Like that's a mystery to me. That's a weird audiogram. That's just kind of, why would the guy have? I'd want to see the bone at 6 if I possibly could. You should always ask what's the tympanometry like. Did you ask what the tympanometry was like?
That's down here.
Okay, let's see. Okay, well you got normal on one ear. And you've got you have a type C on the other ear. Okay? And the type C, the one that's on where the tympanogram is on the left, is that the right ear or the left ear?
This is the right, wait.
The right ear?
Yeah, this is the right ear. This is the left ear.
Okay. So tympanometry, and the right ear is the one that went down, and the left ear is the one that picked up, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, you've got a little bit of an air bone gap too on the right ear. I can see that too. And you have a big air bone gap on the left ear. That's just, I'd send that person to an ENT. I think that's just weird. I'd refer. I just kind of go, refer. Air bone gaps, red flag. Okay, you guys, I better get. All right, now we've got living proof that I've cheated on an exam, right? That I've had the.
tell anybody that.
Not a problem. It's all good. It's how we all learn. I thought that was a rather rude one, too. I had to admit that was kind of a strange one.
I know. I'm going to have to ask these two guys down here.
There you go. You get a chance to converse. All right, you conniving connivance. We'll see you next time. All right.
See you, sir.
Ciao.